Alright, my friends, let us use our genius to explode the brain of this robot. I'm going to begin by casting Absorb Intellect on the Steel Watcher here. Notice the 95% hit chance, so this is almost guaranteed to succeed, and it doesn't even start combat. Now I'm going to enter turn-based mode just so that we can see what's happening. The enemy has taken 2 turns of Absorb Intellect, so their intelligence, which is normally 6, has been reduced down to 4, because Absorb Intellect ticks that down by 1 every turn. Let's go ahead and end our turn and let that tick again. And it's gone down, and you can see that their intellect has ticked down. Intelligence has ticked down to 3 here. Go ahead and do that one more time. And oh wait, that's actually buggy. So that was not supposed to happen for another couple rounds, but the Steel Watcher has just gone ahead and had its brain explode.
Tempting as it is, the guard will not.
Because it has received the atrophied condition. When an enemy's ability score is reduced to 0, it becomes atrophied and dies instantly, with no saving throws or any other abilities. This character is amazing at applying that condition, and is going to be able to one-shot literally any enemy in the game, provided it can reduce its intelligence enough, which we're very good at doing. Alright, let's get to the build. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I've got a build that I'm really excited to cover. This is a build I've been trying to make work for quite some time, and have found a way to make it not only incredibly versatile and incredibly powerful, but it gets to do something that very few other builds get access to. Regular viewers of the channel will know that an Eldritch Knight who gets to both be a powerful fighter and a potent spellcaster is something I've been very interested in building for a while, and this build not only gets to create a character who can fight with the best of them and cast spells with the best of them, you end up with a character who's very difficult to kill, one of the best users of scrolls and illithid powers and spellcasting from magic items in the game, as well as having powerful native spellcasting included with your character, and also, with certain late-game powers, can explode your enemy's brains with a single touch, reducing them from full health to 0 without ever having to enter combat with them. This build is super fun. I'm actually recording this sort of by coincidence on my birthday, so I'm thinking of this build as my birthday present to me, getting this build to work. So hopefully you enjoy. Alright, let's get to the build. We're going to take our initial level in Fighter, because for any caster build that's taking Fighter levels, it's very good to take Fighter as your first level. When you take Fighter at first level, you get heavy armor and shield proficiency. You only get medium armor if you multiclass into it later, so getting heavy armor proficiency can increase our armor class and give us access to better armor sets as well. And when you take Fighter as your first level, you get Constitution save proficiency, making it much easier for you to concentrate on spells. This build will often be concentrating on spells because we're so good at maintaining concentration thanks to our con save proficiency, and so good at using powerful concentration spells from scrolls and magic items and so on, and can gain the benefits of concentration if we're using Concentrated Blast from illithid powers, for example, so there's a lot of different options that you have available. This character can either be played as a monoclass fighter to focus more on your damage output while still having the excellent spellcasting, or can be played with a number of powerful multiclass options, and I'll cover the different variants as we get to the points in the build where you would take them. For our fighting style, we're going to select defense, although a number of other options are available. Protection alongside a shield could work pretty well. 2-weapon fighting could actually be fun in some circumstances with this character, though it will involve a little bit of juggling of items in your inventory if you want to make use of this. So I'm going to recommend defense fighting style. Also, if you have a specific weapon in mind, you could use dueling. This character will be using either clubs or staffs, but some clubs are not versatile and so can benefit from dueling. Staffs are mostly versatile, so you will not benefit from dueling. Overall, I'm going to suggest either protection if you want to stay near your allies and use the powerful protection feature, or defense, and defense is just an excellent default. For our ability score selection, we're going to take an ability point spread that may be surprising if you are expecting a normal fighter build. We're going to take 16 intelligence and 16 constitution, or 14 constitution, as well as 16 dexterity. You could also take 16 constitution if you expect to be hit a little more often or want to tank, but because this build is going to take a lot of fighter levels and have very high AC, I feel like we can get away with the slightly lower hit points in order to give ourselves more initiative, which of course is going to be very important. With our last 4 points, we're going to increase our wisdom saves, and so we have an intelligence focus attribute spread. This might look more familiar to a wizard rather than a fighter, but this character gets to use its intelligence both for combat and for spellcasting, and so we want our intelligence as high as possible. Our skill selection mostly doesn't matter. You're probably going to want acrobatics over athletics because you won't have very high strength on this build. And of course, you might as well take perception. Any character that has access to perception as a class skill should just grab it, even if you only have 12 wisdom. Just the ability to have more characters roll to detect traps is very helpful as you're navigating through the world. Alright, that's it for level 1. Let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we don't get any particular decisions to make, but what we do pick up is Action Surge, which obviously is an incredibly powerful ability for fighters, giving you a ton of extra attacks, but also an incredibly powerful ability for spellcasters, allowing you to cast 2 important spells in a turn, mix and match spellcasting and attacks in the same turn if you need both of them, and giving you a ton of additional action economy and optionality in combat. Obviously, we all know Action Surge is an incredibly powerful ability, one of the best class features in the game, but this character uniquely uses it even better than most other characters because your actions are so powerful and so varied that the addition of more actions is even better for you than it is for everyone else. So you get to turn one of the most powerful abilities in the game to an even stronger version of itself, thanks to the sheer power of the actions that you're doing. At fighter level 3, we're selecting our subclass, and we already know that we're taking Eldritch Knight. Eldritch Knight here is going to allow us to pick up some cantrips and spells, and because we have our intelligence, have high intelligence on this character, we're able to cast Eldritch Knight spells even if they require save DCs or have hit rolls. So unlike a normal Eldritch Knight, which is typically going to avoid any spell that has a hit chance or a save DC associated with it, this character can pick spells that have save DCs and can benefit from them just as well as any other character would. For our cantrip selection, therefore, we're actually going to take some combat cantrips to give us some good ranged options. So I'm going to recommend picking up Ray of Frost, which can be used to create ice surfaces if there's puddles of water or blood on the ground, as well as slow enemies, and Bone Chill, which is a very good option to have in certain fights to disable enemy healing, especially when you have it on a character that's capable of dishing out plenty of damage all on its own. You can use Bone Chill, making sure that because this character's so good at defending itself, you can make sure that you get Bone Chill on the right target without putting a caster at risk by trying to get them into range to use this cantrip to attack a specific enemy. And, of course, you can have this character forward and tanking against enemies that heal pretty frequently. There are some specific boss fights in the game where they heal a ton, and Bone Chill is very helpful, and, of course, giving undead disadvantage on attack rolls for the entire turn is relevant as well, so just a good option to have. For our spell selection, we're still, of course, going to take Shield. The addition of the Shield spell to your heavy armor and your actual shield that you hold in your hands and your defense fighting style gives you AC in the stratosphere, making it very, very difficult for enemies to actually hit this character. And then we're going to take Chromatic Orb, because this gives you a ton of optionality for your ability to fight. Mostly you're going to use this to create an ice surface if you need to disable an enemy specifically, but Chromatic Orb also just gives us a ton of elemental damage, so we have a lot of options there as well. From our expanded spell list options, if you don't have Longstrider, you should still take Longstrider. Elsewhere in the party, you should still take Longstrider. It's just too important to have access to this spell. But this character does have the option to take stuff like Grease, which uses your save DC again, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter, spells that normally the Eldritch Knight can't use because their intelligence won't be very high, but that this character can use. Grease is also uniquely good for this character, again, because you can cast Grease, knocking an enemy over, and then Action Surge to make a bunch of attacks with advantage against that now prone enemy. And then they're stuck in the Grease because they are next to a powerful fighter, so you can use this in melee with specific enemies in order to shut them down completely. So having spells on a melee character is by itself a really good thing. It gives you a lot of strategic options, so we get to make use of those strategic options to the maximum extent when we're playing this character. At character level 4, we get the ability that makes the whole thing tick. Now, up until this point, we've been attacking using finesse weapons or using ranged weapons, like bows, with our dexterity, because we don't have the strength to support your standard fighter melee weapons. That's fine for the first 3 levels of the game, but of course we don't want to be doing that long term. We want to key our spellcasting and our combat abilities off of the same attribute. Luckily, there is a way to do that. Using the feat Magic Initiate Druid, we can take the Shillelagh cantrip. Shillelagh is a really interesting cantrip for non-druid characters when you get it through Magic Initiate, because the spellcasting ability that it uses, despite what this tooltip says, where it's going to use your wisdom as the spellcasting ability, the spellcasting ability that the Shillelagh cares about is the spellcasting ability for the class that you took this feat with. So in this case, it's going to be Eldritch Knight, or Fighter, who uses Intelligence as their casting ability. That means if we have a staff or club equipped and cast Shillelagh, we can use Intelligence both for our attack rolls and damage with our melee weapons, and also for our spell casting, so we get to be single attribute dependent. It's very similar to how a Blade-Packed Warlock can use Charisma for both attacks and spell casts, but in this case we're using our Intelligence and we get to be a Fighter. Fighter has a better sort of base chassis than a Warlock, so getting to do the same thing with Fighter levels, because we just get more hit points, heavy armor, action surge, and so on, is awesome. And the fact that this uses Intelligence specifically gives us access to a very cool brain-exploding combo that I'll talk about a little bit later on in the build. For our second spell selection, remember that these use your wisdom. Other than Shillelagh, these are actually going to use your wisdom for casting. We would really like Thorn Whip, actually, because being able to pull an enemy to us and then bonk them with our staff would be pretty fun. But since it will use our wisdom and thus not have very high save DC, for our second cantrip, we're just going to pick up guidance here. If you already have 2 copies of guidance in your party, you could take resistance. If you don't have that, you could take produce flame for a light source, but mostly guidance is going to be the best utility. For our spell selection here, remember this is only once per long rest, so I'm going to recommend taking Fog Cloud. It doesn't have a save DC, so we can use it once per long rest effectively, and usually you won't need Fog Cloud more than once per long rest, so getting it with Magic Initiate is pretty nice. You could also take Healing Word for an emergency option, or Create Water. All of those are great options as well. For our spell selection from Eldritch Knight here, we are going to pick up Magic Missile. Even though we are good at casting spells, Magic Missile is still too good to leave off, and we don't yet have access to some of the best saving throw targeting spells at this point for us to pick up, though if you do want to push enemies around, this character can get in close to use Thunder Wave better than most other characters because you're a fighter, so you're much more resilient. Alright, now our core combo is online, our spells are cast with Intelligence, our weapon attacks are made with Intelligence, so let's continue the build. At character level 5, we get access to extra attack, and again, could replace a spell. If you find there's one here that you're not using, you could pick it up. For the most part, I'm pretty happy with this spell selection, but it's possible that you won't want both Grease and Chromatic Orb, and could replace it with something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter or Thunder Wave if you think you'll use these more often. Extra attack, of course, just gives us more bonks with our staff, so that is excellent to have at this point, but we can make our character even stronger when we go to level 6, where we get access again to replace spell, but again, our spell selection is perfect, so we're just going to take a feat here, and that feat is going to be to improve our intelligence. You could also, at this point, take alert. That does delay getting higher intelligence quite a bit, though, so I think this character with its 16 dexterity is going to want to just use an initiative item instead of taking alert, in order to max out our intelligence a little bit earlier, but both of those are excellent options, so if you really don't feel comfortable in honor mode without alert at all, I certainly wouldn't fault you for taking it here. At fighter level 7, we get War Magic, and one thing that's kind of fun about War Magic is that when we cast a cantrip, we can make a weapon attack using a bonus action. So now, if we have a hasted action or a bloodlust action, we can cast a cantrip, and our cantrips are actually good to cast, and then make a weapon attack using a bonus action. Obviously, this conflicts a little bit with casting Shillelagh, so you won't do this in your first turn of combat unless you have pre-cast Shillelagh, but this gives you a cool trick where you can basically get an extra whole cantrip cast, provided you have a bloodlusted or hasted action that you wouldn't be able to make multiple attacks with. You can just get a free cantrip cast with that action using War Magic. You can also, at this point, do kind of a cool thing where you get multiple extra bonus actions and then use Shillelagh as a bonus action and then make a second bonus action attack with the now Shillelagh'd weapon if you were to take your next 3 levels as Thief Rogue. So that's one of the cool multi-class options you have available with this character, is get a second bonus action, cast Shillelagh, and then immediately make a War Magic attack with your second bonus action. I'm going to recommend taking fighter levels over doing that, but that's definitely a cool option, gives you a lot more mobility throughout the arena if that's the direction that you're looking to go. We also, at this level, get access to level 2 spells. Now, unfortunately for Eldritch Knight, the ones that we get by default, the evocation spells that evocation or abjuration spells that we're able to pick up at this level, aren't amazing for us, but next level we will be able to pick up level 2 spells on the replace spell feature, so we can pick up much better level 2 spells from the expanded spell list, because you can replace one of these with any spell from across the entire wizard spell list. For now, we're just going to pick up Gust of Wind, because the ability to push enemies around is pretty powerful, and again, this uses your intelligence for the save DC, so you can shove enemies around with Gust of Wind, and then you could take Scorching Ray for a decent ranged damage option, or Shatter. There are definitely some enemies that are weak to thunder that it's nice to have Shatter for somewhere around this stage of the game. You're level 7, so it's possible you're doing Moonrise Towers and need to blow up the scrying orbs using thunder damage, so Shatter can be useful for that. But we're going to replace a lot of these spells pretty quickly anyways as we continue to level up. At fighter level 8, we are going to take our second feat, or third feat rather, and that feat is going to be to increase our intelligence to 20. Now, this character managed to get Magic Initiate Druid and also 2 ASIs by level 8, which is one of the great things about doing this as a monoclass fighter. You get that extra feat, so we're not giving up any progression on our attacks or our spellcasting stat in order to be able to do both of these things with intelligence, thanks to the power of Magic Initiate and the power of fighter getting extra feats. For our expanded spell list here, we're looking for spells that have save DCs that we potentially want to use on enemies. The most powerful of these is going to be Hold Person, of course, because Hold Person is amazing to concentrate on, and we're very good at maintaining concentration, and then if we cast Hold Person on an enemy, and then start whacking them with hasted attacks or action surge attacks, all of those attacks are going to be critical hits. So we're basically self-setting up in order to maximize the damage value of Hold Person. So this is the number 1 spell, and one of the great reasons to be in this character combination in the first place. Then we're going to replace whatever spell here we're using the least often. I suspect at this point you probably won't be using Gust of Wind that frequently, but if you found good uses for it, then definitely hang on to it. But we're just going to go ahead and pick up Misty Step, because every character should have access to Misty Step, and it gives your character a ton of additional mobility. Since we're melee character as well, being able to Misty Step on top of enemies and then hit them with a hold person and then action surge and start wailing away on them can give you an amazing way to deal with powerful ranged or spellcasting enemies that your other characters might have trouble getting to or shutting down in combat. At fighter level 9, we get to pick up Indomitable, which allows us to reroll failed saving throws. One of the only things that can shut down this character is failing a wisdom save against a debilitating mental effect, or failing like a hold person or something like that. Because this character has such good AC and such excellent defensive options, with shield as a reaction, with high hit points, you will very rarely be in danger of dying to physical damage. So the only thing that you're really worried about is failing saving throws and getting taken out of the fight because of that. Indomitable makes that more or less impossible for your character if you have any boosts to your saving throws, which are good items to look out for on this character. Then the reroll will make it very hard for you to fail saves, keeping this character going at all times. The power of that, honestly, can't be understated. One of the things that makes fighters so good is that they just keep going in circumstances where other characters would be shut down. And so, while you don't have the massive spellcasting power of a Pact of the Blade Warlock or a Swords Bard to go with your incredible damage output, you are much more defensively oriented than both of those characters and much harder to shut down, thanks to Indomitable, high AC, high hit points, and so on. So you get to be a spellcasting fighter that actually plays out like a hybrid of both of the two play styles. Then, at fighter level 10, we get Eldritch Strike, which is awesome, because now we can give enemies disadvantage on saving throws against our spells, or against any effect that we're applying. The Eldritch Strike tooltip here is a little bit buggy. It does not only apply to the next saving throw, and it applies to any effect, not just spell effects, so illithid power effects as well. And that's what makes this character one of the best possible users for illithid powers in the game, is we can give enemies disadvantage on the saving throw against them. We have super high intelligence, and we're using intelligence for our illithid powers. We have action surge, so we can do more of them, and so on. So this character with Eldritch Strike can really abuse illithid powers more than just about any other character in the game. For our cantrip selection, of course, we're going to make sure we can land our attacks by taking True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments. And then for our spell selection, we're just going to go ahead and pick up kind of whatever you think might be helpful at this point. Protection from Good and Evil can be vaguely useful. You can cheese some late game encounters with Darkness or Arcane Lock. Mostly we're not going to be using these spells to actually attack enemies at this point, but our replacement spells are much more interesting, so you could pull out one of the spells that you're using least often. Probably Shatter at this point has more or less expended its usefulness for late game spells that you can sometimes land on enemies. One cool option here is actually Crown of Madness, because it turns enemies... It doesn't do at all what the spell says it does. It won't make them attack their allies, but it will make their allies attack them sometimes. And so there are a couple late game encounters where you can, if you can land this on a boss, all of their allies will turn on the boss and beat them down. So this can be helpful for cheesing boss encounters. And again, we're very good at landing spells, so because of Eldritch Strike and because we have high save DCs on them. So you should be able to land spells like this that other characters may not be able to use as easily, much more frequently. Then, of course, at fighter level 11, we get improved extra attack. So when we're hitting things with our bonking stick, we're doing it even more times per turn or per action. And again, you're going to be looking out for cool spells with cool effects, if you can land them, that you usually can't land that often. And also just spells with good utility. Things like invisibility are always good. So again, keep an eye out for spells that you may not be using that frequently at this point, like maybe Chromatic Orb is no longer serving a purpose, and you can pick up invisibility, pick up darkness to cheese late game encounters, and so on. Finally, at fighter level 12, we have a couple different options here. You could pick up a level of Wizard, because we actually don't need our last feat that much. We've already gotten +3 initiative, plus a little bit more from items, and we have maxed out our attribute selection here. So you could take a level of wizard in order to gain access to all of the wizard scrolls for learning even more spells. Wizard won't change your casting stat because it still uses intelligence. If you are taking a level here, you need to take an intelligence casting character, so rogue, fighter, or wizard. So you would take a 1-level dip in wizard to give you a little bit more utility and variety, potentially. But I'm going to recommend just taking the last level of fighter, because it's fun that we get to be monoclass here, and also the feats are still very good. Alert can free up your initiative gear for other characters that might need it more, or you can take stuff like Mage Slayer for additional attacks. Sentinel is also really good for this character, and also enables a pretty cool combination that you can use, with one of the Illithid powers that we might be interested in using. So that's what I'm going to recommend, but you have a lot of different options here between Sentinel, Warcaster, where you can land Shocking Grasp. Again, that will use your intelligence. You don't need to actually know Shocking Grasp to cast Shocking Grasp with Warcaster, so that's another great option, help you maintain concentration on spells. All of those are excellent, so you should choose between Alert if you just need the initiative gear for another character. You can never go wrong taking Alert, or you could take Sentinel or Warcaster. I'm going to recommend Sentinel because of the cool combo. Alright, my friends, that is the intelligence-based fighter. You get to be and feel like a genius when playing this character, but of course, we want to talk about items, and then I will talk about the brain-exploding combo that makes this character so much fun to play, so let's get to that. For items for this character, you get some of the coolest item combinations in the game and get to use them to maximum effect. This character can benefit from a lot of very specific items and also from a lot of certain kinds of items. So I'm going to go over what you should be looking for and then some specific item combinations that you can use to maximum effect. Like any spellcaster and any character that doesn't get Alert, this character is looking for spell save DC gear, like Ketheric's Shield, or initiative gear, like the Sentinel Shield. You're probably going to end up using the Sentinel Shield and then get your spell save DC gear from other items, because +3 initiative gives this character +6, which is enough for not having taken Alert, though if you did take Alert, then you probably want Ketheric's Shield on this character. Either way, anything that increases your spell save DC is great. Anything that increases your initiative is great. Of course, for our weapon, we need either a staff or a club. And one thing that sets this character apart is you, in the late game, are one of the best possible users for Markaheshkir in the end game. Second only to sorcerers who can quicken the Markaheshkir spells, but you can action surge to use a Markaheshkir spell and then cast another spell in the same turn. So you get to abuse the power of Markaheshkir with better action economy than most other characters. And you get to use all of the effects. The heat effect works very well for you, and the lightning effect works very well for this character because you're making actual weapon attacks. In the early game, a really fun option is Nature's Snare, because if you're hitting enemies constantly, and you're hitting enemies several times per round usually, so Nature's Snare will have a very good chance of ensnaring them, which is a pretty powerful debuff, especially in the early game. So this is a great staff to have as a go-to option in the early game. Another cool sort of mid to late game combo is using Morning Frost, which does cold damage, alongside the Snowburst Ring to create circles of ice under everything that you hit. And these circles of ice use your item save DC, use your spellcasting save DC, so enemies are very likely to fall over. If you do that, you're going to want some way to become immune to ice surfaces or immune to becoming prone. I recommend the Boots of Striding, because you can concentrate on a spell. Your character is almost always going to be concentrating on a spell. You may want to pick up Disguise Self so that you have a spell you can concentrate on that's a ritual in order to give you a free concentration when you don't have something that you want to specifically cast, but that can allow you to constantly knock enemies over using the cold damage from the Morning Frost, so it does cold damage, and then whenever you do cold damage, it creates an ice surface, which will immediately knock enemies prone. Speaking of concentrating on spells, you are definitely going to want the Strange Conduit Ring, because you're almost always going to be concentrating, and you have 3 or 6 weapon attacks per turn. So you are making great use of the extra psychic damage here from the Strange Conduit Ring. And the Diadem of Arcane Synergy can give you Arcane Synergy, which happens whenever you inflict a condition, which is always, because we're an Eldritch Knight, so every time we attack, we inflict a condition with Eldritch Strike, and that gives us Arcane Synergy, allowing us to deal additional damage equal to our spellcasting modifier. And remember, we're using our spellcasting modifier for our attacks and damage, so we just get to do double damage from our intelligence. Basically, Arcane Synergy is Tavern Brawler for this character. Finally, you're going to want a good selection of scrolls, because this character can use scrolls very well. You're good at maintaining concentration. Some particularly notable ones are AoE disable spells, things like Fear. And Fear is an especially good one for this character, because you can easily put yourself up into close proximity to enemies to maximize the AoE of Fear, since it's a cone. Squishier spellcasters may often not want to position themselves to get best use out of this, but you don't care. You can get right up into the mix and use it. Things like Evard's Black Tentacles, which you can trap enemies in, and if you hit them in the edge of the tentacles, then you can just hit them from outside of it safely. If you took Sentinel, you probably are going to want something like Cloud Kill or Wall of Fire that you can keep enemies trapped in using your Sentinel attacks, and anything else that is just good for winning encounters. Sometimes being able to concentrate on Sunbeam, and so you can just use your actions to consistently cast Sunbeam, is very good. Potions of Speed are excellent for this character. Of course, you use Haste very, very well, because you're an Eldritch Knight. I talk a bit more about this in my Eldritch Knight guide, but with the hasted action on honor mode, you can cast a cantrip and then make a bonus action attack. So a hasted action gives you an attack and a cantrip, whereas every other character, it only gives an attack. So that's a pretty nice boost as well. Finally, of course, you're just going to want the best heavy armor that you can find, although there will be times in the game where a medium armor might be better, thanks to 16 dexterity, so potentially the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail or the Armor of Agility will be better than your best heavy armor. Do keep an eye out for that and swap between them as needed. Basically here you're just looking for the highest possible AC that you can pick up, depending on what armor you've found up to that point in the game. Alright, let's talk about the Brain Explosion combo, because that is one of the really fun things that this character gets to do because we're attacking with intelligence. If you have this character have illithid powers, then you can give them the ability drain illithid power. So once per turn when they make an attack, you reduce the target's corresponding stat by 1. For most characters with weapon attacks, this is either strength or dexterity, but for us, it's going to be intelligence, because our melee attacks are made using our intelligence. So once per turn, we can reduce an enemy intelligence by 1 with ability drain. Notice also that this cooldown is once per turn, so you can double up on it if you get to make an opportunity attack. With Sentinel, that means you can apply ability drain multiple times in a turn. The cool part happens when you get to take the Absorb Intellect, Elite Illithid power. This is only available in Act 3, you have to take the Astral Tadpole to do this, but Absorb Intellect lowers enemy intelligence by 1 every turn for 5 turns, to a maximum of 5, and you can cast it as a bonus action if you have the Zaithisk, and so on. The gimmick here is that there is a secret mechanic in the game that's not ever explained to the player, where if an enemy's attribute ever reaches 0, they die instantly. So if you are reducing enemy intelligence by 5 with Absorb Intellect, and reducing it further with ability drain attacks, you can blow up their minds. Now, Absorb Intellect doesn't start combat. It does not actually it doesn't count as a crime, and it doesn't start combat. So you can cast it on an enemy and then wait until the 5th turn before attacking them to start them off with a -6 intelligence penalty. -6 means that any enemy who has 6 or less intelligence will die instantly. And there's a particularly notable enemy type in the game that has exactly 6 intelligence, Steel Watchers. This is going to let you one-shot any Steel Watcher in the game by hitting them with Absorb Intellect and then bonking them once with ability drain, and that will instantly kill them by exploding their brain. This ability is also bugged, Absorb Intellect, and will often one-shot enemies who have much higher than 5 or 6 intelligence, for reasons that I haven't figured out, but sometimes enemies with 16, 20 intelligence just pop instantly to Absorb Intellect. I've seen even some of the most powerful late-game bosses just get their brains exploded by this ability. I don't know exactly what triggers the bug, but sometimes you're just going to get random kills on enemies even when you shouldn't when you have this ability. This is going to let us kill any low intelligence enemy very, very easily with ability drain, because we can reduce their intelligence scores so rapidly. We're always going to hit at least once because we're making so many attacks, and we're reducing enemy intelligence to the point where their brain explodes. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this build guide to the Genius Knight. And if you have, of course, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. YouTube really does emphasize engagement and interactions when it decides whether to recommend a video to someone, so if you want to help out a content creator, taking 3 seconds to hit those buttons and leaving literally any comment below is the best way to do that. And of course you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 videos and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.